amongst us is Narsimha Kavaca Prabhuji. Prabhuji is from ISKCON Mayapur Dham. ISKCON Mayapur Dham. Prabhuji is leading the DT department. So all the devotees who are getting trained in DT worship, they are getting trained under Prabhuji. So we have like Ravi Lochan Prabhuji. Recently Madhav Krishna also got trained. Many devotees in all the temples, they get trained under Prabhuji. Prabhuji is very enthusiastic, very scholarly, and a great devotee of the Lord. So we are so very fortunate to have him during this festival. And as all of you know that we are having Gaur Katha series. Every day we are having Gaur Katha. So today we will be hearing Gaur Katha from Mayapur Dham Vasi. His Grace Narsimha Kavaca Prabhuji. So what better can be a good fortune that we may be blessed with. So we are so very fortunate to have Prabhuji, Narsimha Kavaca Prabhuji. So let's welcome Prabhuji by chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare His Grace Narsimha Kavaca Prabhuji ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai, Gaur Kathamrit ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. So actually, I don't live in Mayapur. I live out of my suitcase. I spend most of the time on the road. But I'm a few months a year in Mayapur. And we have a school in Mayapur. You know Ati Priya Naguna. There's one of your wonderful pujaris here. So he graciously comes to Mayapur every year to help us teach pujaris at the Mayapur Academy. So we train pujaris, devotees from around the world. And every year we usually have a few head pujaris come. So yeah. And we have devotees from around the world also come for training. We have our devotees in Mayapur, Ananda Leela, who I guess you might know Ananda Leela, yeah? Do you know Ananda Leela?
Ananda Leela, yes, I have heard her name, yes.
Yeah. You know Braj Vilas, right? Everyone knows Braj Vilas. Yes. Yeah. TOVP Braj Vilas, yeah. So this is his wife. Yeah. So she runs the school, and she's from Delhi originally. Yeah. She's a Delhi Walla.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. and a few other devotees there. But we have also the head pujari from London. He comes and does training. So yeah, our goal is to try to guide devotees as to what are the standards of worship that Prabhupada wanted in ISKCON, and try to inspire them to take up those standards. We're not trying to introduce anything new, because Prabhupada said, I have given you everything you need. You don't need to add anything. If we can just follow the simple process of bhakti that Prabhupada gave us, it'll take us back to Godhead. We don't need anything else. And other things ultimately are just a distraction. So if we can just follow what Prabhupada gave, then we'll go back to Godhead in this life. And actually he told Jamuna, he said, I have given you this process of deity which I've given you, this simple process. If you just follow this, it'll take you back to Godhead. He also told Giriraj Maharaj, he said that deity worship is not the process for this age, and chanting Hare Krishna is. But if we get too caught up in the complicated deity worship, devotees will forget that the Yoga Dharma is the holy name. So we have to keep this. Deity worship is wonderful, but just remember what the Yoga Dharma is. We have to keep these things in perspective always. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Girivarathariya Gopijana Ballabha Gopijana Ballabha Girivarathariya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Gopijana Ballabha Girivarathariya Gopijana Ballabha Girivarathariya Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Girivarathariya Gopijana Ballabha Girivarathariya Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Par Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashto Tarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace of High Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Save the Whole World Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Par Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashto Tarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Namacharya Sharaidas Thakur Ki Premzika Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Sadigora Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopanath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Brajbhumi Shivandamadama Ki Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki, Purushottam Kshetra Jagannath Puri Dham ki, Ganga Mai ki, Jamuna Mai ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Tulasi Maharani ki, Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Krishna Style. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So, Amoghadita Prabhu said I was scholarly. That's not the fact at all. I like to read Prabhupada's books, that's about it. I'm just an ordinary devotee, nothing special about me. Okay, so what I was planning on doing, there's a really interesting section in the 6th chapter of the Antya Lila. So as you know, the Chaitanya Charitamrita has 3 sections, the Adi Lila, the Madhya Lila, and the Antya Lila. Adi Lila describes the early pastimes, then the Madhya Lila is the middle pastimes, and then the Antya Lila is the concluding pastimes. So Antya Lila mostly focuses on Jagannath Puri, the Lord's pastimes in Jagannath Puri, and also Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's interactions with his devotees and disciples there in Jagannath Puri. And some extraordinary exchanges, just completely extraordinary, and something that we can learn a lot from if we take to the study of this deeply and try to imbibe the qualities that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because this is the one thing, it's like, in devotional service or in anything we do, obviously there's the external activity. And you see, we can sweep the temple, we can do whatever, we can do any activity. But what really matters is the internal consciousness which is behind that. Because we can be cleaning the temple, for instance, but really feeling resentment. That, oh, why am I doing this? Why is so-and-so not doing this? They should be doing this. I'm a more elevated devotee. I should be getting, the best services to do. Whatever that might be, eating halava or something. Whereas this is not a good consciousness, and actually one's not going to get the benefit of the service, or not the full benefit. But if one has the consciousness of feeling very honored and very grateful to have this opportunity to serve Krishna, then this is really going to help us in our devotional service. As we see, Rupa Goswami in the Upadeshamrita, he talks about some important qualities that will help us to achieve pure devotional service. He says, Utsahan nisjadaya tat tat kamravatana sangotyagat sato vritti sadbhi bhakti prasidyati. This utsahan, this is really important, that whatever service, whatever menial service or important service, whatever it is we do it with enthusiasm. Just like recently I was in Mayapur and I had the good fortune of sharing an apartment with Ati Priya Prabhu. And whatever you'd ask him to do, he'd do it with such enthusiasm. There was no reluctance or, why are you asking me to do this? Who do you think you are? Such enthusiasm to do devotional service. This is, and Rupa Goswami, who's our most prominent acharya, who we're all claiming to be Rupanugas. He's telling us that this is a key to devotional service. And then determination, patience, following regular principles. giving up the association of devotees, and only associating with devotees. These are the 6 principles that are favorable to the execution of devotional service. So here, what I want to read from is, as I said, the 6th chapter, and there's quite a few verses before where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is instructing Raghunath Das Goswami in how to live as a sannyasi, how to live as a renunciate. Because, as we know, Raghunath Das Goswami was the embodiment of renunciation. He lived such a renounced life. I mean, he used to eat so little, which is kind of really interesting if you look at the background he came from. He came from a very, very, very wealthy family. I mean, I don't think that we could think of anyone in this day and age who has comparable wealth. It's just like the amount of, I think Prabhupada mentioned that every day they had 30,000 rupees income, which today might not seem like a lot of money. But if you go back 500 years and look at the value of money 500 years ago to what money is now, I mean, even just in my short life, I've seen the value of money decrease so much. I remember as a child, we used, because we used to have shillings and pennies and stuff like that, and we used to go to the shop and buy a 6pence worth of lollies, and you get enough to last you the whole day. Yeah? Now, if you go and you buy 5 cents, actually you can't buy 5 cents worth of lollies. You can't buy anything for 5 cents. You know? And actually what happened in Australia is they got rid of the 1 cent and the 2 cent pieces because you can't buy anything with 1 cent. You know? And that's, that's just the value of money is decreasing. So, if we look in the space of 50 years, how much the value of money has decreased, you can imagine how much more value the money had 500 years ago. Prabhupada talks about for a few annas, which I don't even know what an anna is. I remember paisa. When I first used to come to India, they had the 10, 20, and 50 paisa pieces, which they don't have them anymore, do they? Why? Because the value of money's gone down. Yeah? And Prabhupada talks about how you can buy a huge pile of rice for a few annas. If you want to buy a bag of rice now, how much do you have to pay? Yeah? I think a good basmati is like 200 rupees a kg, something like that. So everything's come down in value. But the point being is that Raghunath Das Goswami came from a fabulously wealthy family, opulence we cannot imagine. And he gave that all up. He just saw the whole thing as being distasteful. And he gave that up simply to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Which, if we actually have the proper consciousness, this service to the Lord is the greatest opulence. There is no greater opulence than having the opportunity to serve the Lord. Just like yesterday, I had the good fortune to go to Vrindavan. I haven't been to Vrindavan for 4 years. I don't know how much most of you are aware of the news of the world. I usually spend a lot of time in Australia. That's where I live with my wife. And Australia in 2020 reverted to being a penal colony. We were locked up for 3 years. We couldn't leave the country. And it's only September last year they let us out again. And the only way you could actually get out of the country is you had to submit an application to the Department of Foreign Affairs, and they'd review your case and see if they'd let you out or not. It was very difficult. Well, it wasn't really difficult. Just stay there, and it was okay. It was fine. It's peaceful. But so I hadn't been to Vrindavan for 4 years, and just like it was kind of a really interesting day. I didn't realize it was the start of Holi, and everywhere in Vrindavan there was colour. People were throwing it all over the place. And I went with Sadhu Hridoy from Radha Parthasarthi temple, and we didn't get a spot of colour on us, which I was quite surprised. I figured it was just the mercy of Radharani. Anyhow, so I want to talk about Raghunath Das Goswami. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just given him instructions about how to live as a sannyasi, not to dress very comfortably, not to live a very comfortable lifestyle, and to eat very simply. And Raghunath Das Goswami has taken this instruction to heart. And we see that he was begging at the Dwarka gate, and it was quite amazing because what he'd do is like when the shopkeepers would they'd be selling the Mahaprasadam. Then after 2 or 3 days, the Mahaprasad would go rancid. So they'd throw it down for the cows to eat. But even the cows wouldn't eat it. Raghunath Das Goswami, he would pick up this prasad and he'd wash it very carefully to remove all the rancid part, and then he'd eat the rice, the hard part of the rice in the middle. Very, very renounced. And then he even gave that up because he started to think, well, if I'm begging like this, then I become like a prostitute. And then he started to take from the free food stalls. And his renunciation just was increasing. And even when his parents heard about the way he was living, they just cried. They were so disturbed to hear that he was living such an austere life. But he was so happy, he was so satisfied to have this opportunity to associate with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to just focus on hearing and chanting. So it's very, at least I can talk of my consciousness. I'm always looking for a comfortable situation. If the bed's not soft enough, I can't sleep. It's just like, do you know the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears? You ever heard that? Oh, okay, so I won't tell the whole story, but in Australia we grew up with all these fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales and things like that. Anyhow, so like there was Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and she went to this I won't get into it too much, you won't understand anyhow. But everything had to be just right, The porridge had to be it couldn't be too hot, it couldn't be too cold, the bed had to be just right, it couldn't be too hard, it couldn't be too soft. Everything had to be just right. So I'm a bit like that, I'm a bit like Goldilocks, Everything's got to be just right, otherwise I can't function. And if I don't have internet, I'm finished. Okay, so we'll read from text 288. Shankarananda Saraswati Vrindavani Hoita Aila Tenhase Shila Gunja Mala Lana Gela. Previously, when Shankarananda Saraswati had returned from Vrindavan, he had brought the stone from Govardhan Hill and also the garland of conch shells. Pashve Ganta Gunja Mala Govardhana Shila Dui Vastu Mahaprabhura Agi Ani Dila. He presented Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with these two items, the garland of conch shells and the stone from Govardhan Hill. Duya Purva Vastupana Prabhu Tushta Haila Smaranela Kale Gela Pare Gunja Mala. Upon receiving these two uncommon items, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was extremely happy. While chanting, he would put the garland around his neck. So why are they uncommon, and why was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu extremely happy? Okay, but why? How did he see the Govardhan Shila? Yeah, he saw the Govardhan Shila as directly Krishna. And how did he see the Gunjamala? As Radharani. Yeah? So he was very happy because he'd been given Radha and Krishna. And has anyone seen that Govardhan Shila? Yeah? You've all been to Radha Gokulananda temple in Vrindavan? And there's a little rectangular Shila. And you'll notice it's got a depression in it, yeah? So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he used to chant his japa, he would hold the Govardhan Shila and rub the Govardhan Shila. And it's described how the Govardhan Shila would melt in ecstasy from hearing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chant. Pretty far out, huh? Nothing melts in ecstasy when I chant. Yeah. So yeah, it's very, very significant, and he would actually bathe the Govardhan Shila in his tears when he was chanting. The tears would flow from his eyes. Govardhana Shila Prabhu Hridaya Netratare Kabu Nasaya Grana Laya Kabu Shire Kare. The Lord would put the stone to his heart, or sometimes to his eyes. Sometimes he would smell it with his nose, and sometimes he would place it on his head. So, I don't know if you've ever seen shalagram worship, or you've done shalagram worship yourself. It's quite common for devotees, when they worship the shalagram, in the morning when they start the worship, is they'll smell the shila and then place the shila on their head. Because the shila, usually you rub very, very high quality fragrant oils in the shila. There's lots of tulsi, chandan, things like that. So the shila has a beautiful fragrance, yeah, from all this worship, the flowers, etc. And also you touch the shila on the head. Now some devotees may think, oh, why do you want to touch the shila on your dirty body? But actually, well, there's many things there. The upper part of the body is considered somewhat clean. But also it's a way of respecting the deity, but also it's mentioned in Shastra. Just like, I remember years ago talking with one senior devotee about the process of worship, and how when you go on the altar in the morning, the first thing the pujari should do after they clear the altar is touch their head to the feet of the deities. And he was questioning that. He says, but why are you touching the deity with your body like that? Because the body's not clean. I said, well, actually, it's a statement from Sanatana Goswami that we should do it. And Prabhupada, he mentioned, he said that everyone can't do it, but at least the pujari should do this every day. So if you go on the altar in places like Mayapur, for instance, you'll see that the first thing all the pujaris do is when they come on the altar is they put their head on the feet of Madhava, Radharani, the Sakhis. Yeah? Because this is the sign of submitting ourselves at the feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's the same when we pay obeisance and we come before the deity in the morning. It's not just we go through some ritual, we lie down, we offer prayer, whatever. No, we're actually submitting ourselves at the lotus feet of Krishna. Sometimes you'll see devotees, they'll cross their hands like that, and the idea is that they're meditating, they're touching the feet of the deity. Yeah? So the idea is you submit yourself at the feet of the Lord. So we see here also, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's giving us the example of how to serve. So sometimes he touched the Shila to his heart, sometimes he smells, sometimes he touched to his head, sometimes to his eyes. Yeah? So very, very nice description here. Netra jale se Shila biji nirantara, Shila rekha hena Prabhu Krishna kalevara. The stone from Govardhan was always moist with tears from his eyes. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would say, this stone is directly the body of Lord Krishna. So here we see, if you're ever confused about who the Govardhan Shila is, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling us clearly. Sometimes I've seen devotees, they'll have Giriraj and Girirajini, yeah? But there's no praman for that. Our worship is done, or anything we do in devotional service must be done according to praman. We can't make up our own process, because if you concoct a process, there will be no benefit from that. If you actually are keen, or you're determined to go back to Godhead, then as it says, Mahajana yene kata sapanta, you follow that path which is given by the Mahajans. And Srila Prabhupada is definitely a Mahajan, and he has given us a very clear path to back to Godhead. So if we're at all eager to achieve the supreme destination, then we follow what he's given us, and without a doubt we will achieve that destination. E mata tina vatsara shila mala darila, Tushtehana Shila Mala Raghunate Dila. For 3 years he kept the stone and garland. Then, greatly satisfied by the behavior of Raghunath Das, the Lord delivered both of them to him. So we see here how Jai Rukmini Dwarka, Jai. We see here how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was observing the renunciation of Raghunath Das Goswami, and that he was willing to give up all material facility, all material attachment. And this is, we have to do the same ourselves, because as long as you have material attachments, you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay here in this material world. If you're at all determined to go back to Godhead, we have to let go of all material attachments. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to live like Raghunath Das Goswami, but it means you need to be completely detached from everything of this world, because ultimately it's just a distraction and it will not bring you closer to Krishna. And so when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu observed Raghunath Das Goswami's renunciation, he was pleased by that. But he was also pleased to see that he was always meditating on what would make Chaitanya Mahaprabhu happy. For instance, he had a fancy blanket, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu looked at the blanket, and immediately he understood Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind. And he went and saw a beggar on the street, and he said, "Oh, I like your blanket, would you like to swap?" And the beggar couldn't believe it, because he had this really expensive blanket. but he was happy to take it. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he saw that, he was pleased. Yeah? And so progressively, Raghunath Das Goswami was becoming more and more renounced. And this was very pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in the same way, when we cultivate renunciation, particularly renunciation from material attachments, then this is going to be pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he will bestow his mercy upon us. There's a nice verse that says, Kantanchana smriti yasmin duskaram sukaram bhavet vishmite viparitam shat Sri Chaitanya namavitam. Things that are very difficult to do, they become easy to execute if somehow or other you meditate on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But even easy things become very difficult if you forget Lord Chaitanya. So this is the key, is to always, and as we see with Raghunath Das Goswami, he was always meditating on what would be pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was always trying to focus on what would satisfy Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so, we see he was becoming more and more renounced. Prabhu kahe e shila krishnera vigraha inharar seva kara tumikariya agraha. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Raghunath Das, this stone is the transcendental form of Lord Krishna. Worship the stone with great eagerness. So there's a purport here, but I'll just discuss this a little bit. So now we see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving instructions to Raghunath Das Goswami. And the first thing we see is, okay, he identifies the stone as this is Krishna. This is the transcendental form of Krishna. It's not a rock. Yeah? Some people struggle with that. We have Govardhan Shilas, we have Shalagram Shilas. They find it difficult to understand that this is actually directly Krishna. But here we have a praman from the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. He's saying this is directly Krishna. But then he's talking about qualities. He's talking about the quality. Worship the stone with great eagerness. So as I mentioned before, this verse from Rupa Goswami, this utsaha. To worship with eagerness, this is a key to being successful in devotional service, to progressing on the path of bhakti, is to be enthusiastic. If we want to make good progress, then we need to be enthusiastic. And we see also that, actually I'll talk about this in a second because Prabhupada does discuss it further. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya that in the opinion of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Govardhan Shila, the stone from Govardhan Hill, was directly the form of Lord Krishna, the son of Maharaj Nanda. The Lord used the stone for 3 years, and then in the heart of Raghunath Das, the Lord awakened devotional service to the stone. So we see how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada is describing how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu empowered Raghunath Das. He empowered him in his renunciation. We see also that when Rupa Goswami first came to Puri and he was spending time with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that Swarup Damodar, I think it was Swarup Damodar, maybe it was son of Ramananda Roy, I can't remember, it was both, had mentioned that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had empowered Rupa Goswami to understand the science of bhakti. And he had done that when he met him at, where did he meet him? In Prayag, wasn't it? At Dasha Ashwamedha Ghat. Yeah. And he had instructed him on the science of bhakti for 10 days. Yeah. So, he had instilled the science of bhakti in his heart, and he'd empowered him so he understood it. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had a mission, and his mission was to establish the Yuga Dharma. But obviously, he's not going to do that all on his own. He's going to empower his devotees. And we see, excuse me, there's so many pastimes in the scriptures where Krishna is empowering devotees to achieve specific tasks. Just like, it's really interesting in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, probably about, chapter 13 of the first canto, I think it is, where it's the passing of Bhishmadev. And what happened was Yudhisthira was feeling this great lamentation because so many people had died at Kurukshetra. I mean, some accounts say 640 million people had died at Kurukshetra. And so he was feeling very remorseful because all this had been done just so he could be the king. That was his meditation. And so he couldn't be consoled. Srila Vyasadeva tried to console him. Couldn't be consoled. So many great sages and rishis tried to console him. Couldn't be consoled. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, couldn't console him. Does that sound right? No, this was Krishna's arrangement. Why? Because he wanted Bhishma Dev to get the glory. And then we see that Bhishma Dev, the Pandavas and Krishna, they went to Bhishma as he was leaving this world. And it's very wonderful because all the, the who's who of the rishis in the universe all came to hear, because they knew that Bhishma was the foremost authority on Dharma. And they knew that this was going to be an extraordinary event. And he spoke, some accounts have that he spoke for 54 days on Dharma. And he just, he told Yudhisthira, explained to him what was the Dharma of all the different varnas and ashrams, specifically what was the Dharma of a king. And also through his instructions he pacified Yudhisthira, and he went and ruled the kingdom for 30-something years after that. So the point being is that Krishna empowers devotees because he really wants the devotees to get the glory. He wants to glorify his devotees because he loves his devotees very much. And so he makes so many arrangements. Just like we see with Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was walking on the beach in Juhu one time, and then Giriraj Maharaj asked him a question. He says, why didn't Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spread this, the Yuga Dharma, or spread Krishna consciousness around the world? And Prabhupada, he stopped and he stuck his cane down in the sand. He says, because he was saving it for me. So Krishna likes to glorify his devotees. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu likes to glorify his devotees. He likes to empower them to achieve these wonderful tasks. And it's a reciprocation for the surrender. So we see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu empowered Raghunath Das to practice renunciation, but also he inspired him to take up the worship of this Govardhan Shila. The Lord then gave the stone to Raghunath Das, accepting him as one of his most confidential servants. However, some envious people conclude that because Raghunath Das had not taken birth in the family of a Brahmana, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not give him the right to worship the deity directly, but instead gave him a stone from Govardhan. This kind of thought is naraki, or hellish. As stated in the Padma Purana, Achi Vishnu Shiradir Gurushu Naramati Vaishnavi Jati Buddhi Yasha Va Naraki Sa. If one thinks that the worshipable telegram is a mere stone, or the spiritual master is an ordinary human being, or that a pure Vaishnava preaching the Bhakti cult all over the world is a member of a particular caste or material division of society, he is considered a naraki, a candidate for hellish life. And we see that Srila Prabhupada understood this principle very well. He engaged all types of persons in devotional service. It doesn't matter what country you're from, doesn't matter what sort of body you have, whether you have a male body, a female body, doesn't matter, because that's all external. And at some point we have to see the separation between the externality of the body and the fact that I'm a spirit, soul, eternal servant of Krishna. My constitutional nature is to be a servant of Krishna, regardless of the body I have, regardless of where I took birth. Someone may have taken birth in India, someone like me took birth in Australia. So what? What's that got to do with anything? That's all external. But unfortunately we see, I had an experience years ago, I won't say where it was, but it was in some particular temple in India, and we were touring with, there was a group of brahmacharis. I was actually a brahmachari at the time, and we were touring India with Ramaya Swami, and we were visiting this temple, and they had some boat there that they used to take the deity on, and there were some local people who were going on the boat and having a closer look at the different things, and then we went on it. We walked on the boat and we got chastised for it because we have Western bodies. We're impure. Yeah? So we can see how people, they have this very materialistic concept and they base it on the body. But actually the process of bhakti, the process of devotional service is beyond the body. It's the connection of the jiva, the pure jiva, with Krishna. So the more we're able to understand this position, the more we're able to awaken that position of devotional service, or that consciousness and that reality of serving Krishna directly. But if we make all these distinctions that, because someone has an Indian body or an Australian body or an English body or whatever, then we gauge, whether they can do deity worship or not. This is external. Or, like Prabhupada's pointing out here, they're thinking because Raghunath Das, he came from a Vaishya background, didn't come from a Brahmana background. And this unfortunately, this consciousness is still quite prevalent in India, that people think because they have a Brahman background or they have a Brahman thread, that they're better than people who don't. And you'll even experience, like, in Vrindavan, for instance, you'll find rickshaw wallahs that have a Brahman thread. And they think they're superior to the ones that don't. Hey, hang on a minute. You're pushing a rickshaw? And you think you're better than someone else pushing a rickshaw because you've got a piece of string that you bought in the shop for, a few rupees? How are you better? It's just based on externalities. And we need to get past that. And that's what we see how Raghunath Das, he was definitely past that, So we need to be very careful not to identify according to one's body. He indirectly advised such foolish persons that one should not be envious of a Vaishnava who belongs to a different caste or sect. One should accept a Vaishnava as transcendental. In this way, one can be saved. Otherwise, one is surely awaiting a hellish life. If we identify a Vaishnava according to their body, and if we see the deity as being matter, hellish life awaits us, because it's a really, really degraded mentality. Ishilara kara tumi satvika pujana, achirat pabi tumi Krishna prema dana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, worship this stone in the mode of goodness like a perfect Brahmana. For by such worship you will surely attain an ecstatic love of Krishna without delay. So again we see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is talking about values here. And in deity worship, I often say, I can teach anyone the rituals of deity worship. It's a really simple thing. I could teach a monkey how to do deity worship. Because they can mimic things really easily. You see, like, they don't do it so much anymore, but they used to have these zoos, or not zoos, sorry, circuses, where they train animals to do different things. So you can teach an animal how to do that and ring a bell. So what? Does it mean there's bhakti there? No, it's just a ritual. And I'm sure you've all had the experience where you see these paid brahmanas, they come and they do, they open the temple, they ring the bell, they do whatever they're going to do, and they go. And they couldn't care less about the deity. It's just a job, they're paid for it. There's no exchange between the servant and the deity. There's no exchange at all. It's just a job. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making a very, very important instruction here to worship the stone in the mode of goodness. That's the first thing. Is, as worshippers of Krishna, this is one of the first things we need to focus on, is cultivating the mode of goodness. Because you can read in the Bhagavad Gita that there's quite a lengthy discussion in the 14th chapter, also in the 10th chapter, about the modes of nature and how they affect us. So as we know, like mode of ignorance, basically the outcome of the mode of ignorance is madness. And it's kind of interesting, I don't know if any of you travel to the West, but you'll find in the Western countries these days more and more crazy people. Mode of ignorance is becoming more prominent. Previously it was mostly passion, but now mode of ignorance is becoming more prominent. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to sleep all day long, but just the things they're doing. So much meat eating is going on, so much abortion, and all these horrible things are happening. In many countries of the world now, abortion has become legal. Previously it was illegal, but now it's become legal. So there's many problems like that, and this mode of ignorance is becoming stronger and stronger. So definitely we don't want to do worship in the mode of ignorance, but also in the mode of passion. We have to be careful, especially for those devotees who are in the kitchen, when you're near the flame. This can promote rajagun. When there's a lot to do, especially festivals, there's so much to do, this can promote rajagun. So we need to cultivate the mode of goodness. We need to be thoughtful about what we're doing, because we know, ignorance results in madness. What does passion result in? The main outcome of passion? Distress. You may be hankering and lamenting, but what does that cause? It causes distress, because I don't have this, I want this. It causes distress. Yeah? And goodness results in illumination. You see things as they are. So this is a sign of goodness. You just see things as they are. And you contemplate carefully the outcome of your actions. Someone who's in the mode of goodness, that they'll see that, okay, if I do this, what will be the result? And just, I remember having a conversation with Jayapataka Maharaj about this many years ago when we were on, this is before he had his unfortunate stroke, but we're on the elephant procession when the deities go out on the elephant. And he was talking about how everything he does, devotees watch, And so, it's like that for us in this ISKCON. We're out there, we're trying to present Krishna consciousness to the broader society, and every little thing you do, they pick up on it, Even though you're not even aware of it yourself, but everything you do, Even sometimes like the way you tie your dhoti, Yeah? But you see it, it's there in Yad Yad Achirishé says Tattva. You'll see some I noticed in India now, there's so many beards, right? Where's that come from? Probably from these cricket guys, because they're all the big rock stars, But and you'll see some pop star. I remember it happened years ago in the UK. She was wearing some clothes, with tears in the legs on. And I went in the UK, and every single young lady had clothes with tears in them. I thought they're wearing rags, Whenever we had tears in our clothes, we throw them out. So you see that whatever a great person does, the common man follows. And so it's really important for us that whatever we do, we're very careful, we're conscious of the effect it's going to have on others. Because this society, Prabhupada said, this society has the ability to save the world. But if we're inspiring people in improper behavior, not going to do a very good job. So Prabhupada's saying here, Mahaprabhu is saying here to worship the deity in the mode of goodness. This is the first thing we have to do, because then we'll actually, if we worship in the mode of goodness, we'll start to actually understand that this is Krishna directly. This Sakshat Brajendanandana. There's not, it says, Pratima nahi tumi, Sakshat Brajendanandana. My dear Lord, you're not a statue. You're directly the son of Nanda Maharaj, Krishna. There's a very, very important statement, that how this young Brahmana boy is explaining that this is Krishna directly. And Chaitanya, excuse me, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just said the same thing to Raghunath Das Goswami. This is directly Krishna. And then he says to, like a perfect Brahmana. So especially in Kali Yuga, what are the two prominent symptoms of a Brahmana? So we know the verse Samadhamma taposacham chantarajam jnanam vijnanam astikam brahma kama sabhavacham. So what does Prabhupada say are the two most prominent qualities of a Brahmana in Kali Yuga? The only two things really remaining. No? There's socham and arjavam. Arjavam meaning honesty. So purity. This is the most important quality for all of us, actually, because we're meant to be Vaishnavas, and Vaishnavas are meant to be beyond a Brahmana. So we have to develop purity. And I'm sure the temples just had enough of me, because everywhere I go, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll have a look in the Pujari department, and I'll point out where they can improve cleanliness. Because this is, if you read Prabhupada's instructions or whatever on deity worship, he always point out about cleanliness, how it's so important. In a letter he wrote to, I think it was Rukmini or Shilavati, I can't remember, maybe it was Shilavati. Shilavati was the first Pujari in ISKCON. Prabhupada said, he was explaining the whole sort of, how to be clean and stuff like that. He said the idea is summit cleanliness. So when you talk about the summit, it means the top of the mountain. You go on a mountain, the summit, you can't go any higher. That will satisfy Krishna. Right? It means that everything is so clean, you cannot possibly make it any cleaner. If you can make something cleaner, it's not clean. Simple as that. If you can be cleaner, it's not clean. I'll tell you a story. Prabhupada was visiting Vrindavan. This is in the early days when he was staying at Radha Damodar. but he'd been to the West. I think it was the first time he came back. And Jamuna was cleaning his rooms. She was looking after his rooms. And Jamuna had a unique relationship with Krishna. We can, with Prabhupada, and we can say that no one else had a relationship like Jamuna. It's obvious in the way that Prabhupada treated her. He actually treated her like his daughter. And so one time, and what Jamuna did, she'd clean Prabhupada's desk and she'd put everything exactly, she'd wipe all the pens down, she'd wipe the stapler down, everything, put it back exactly the way it was. And she was feeling, satisfied that she'd cleaned Prabhupada's room really nicely, because she was a very particular person. And Prabhupada came down, he sat behind his desk, he was doing some things, and he said, Jamuna, when will you ever learn? What do you mean, Swamiji? I don't understand. When will you ever learn? I don't know what you mean, Swamiji. He said, when will you ever learn to clean? And she's thinking she's cleaned everything very perfectly, And Prabhupada, he took the stapler off the desk, he opened up the stapler, he wiped his finger inside, he said, see, dust. That's what Prabhupada meant by clean. If something wasn't clean inside and out, it's not clean. Just like you can see, most altars you go onto, if you take the spoon out of the Achman cup and you look at the spoon, is it clean? How are you going to purify yourself with a dirty spoon? So this is the type of cleanliness Prabhupada wanted. And so this is why this is really important here, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is talking about the qualities or the values that you should have as a worshipper of God. And there's a nice purport in the 13th chapter. You're probably all familiar with the verses. I don't remember the verses, but they start off with Adam Vittam Maman Vittam, where Krishna is talking about all the different qualities of a devotee. And one of them is Sorcham. And then in the purport, Prabhupada, he goes through and he describes each of the qualities. And he said, when he describes Sorcham, he opens up, he says, without cleanliness, it is not possible to make spiritual advancement. Without cleanliness, it is not possible to make spiritual advancement. And now we understand what Prabhupada means by cleanliness. Sparkling clean. Without that, because if you're not clean, you're not purifying your heart. When Prabhupada was in Kumbh Mela, I think it was 70, maybe it was 76. It was the last time he went to Kumbh Mela. And again, he was with Jamuna. And he pointed out this sadhu who had a gindi, water pot. And he said, you see this sadhu's water pot? You see how clean it is? It was sparkling clean. He said, this means his heart is clean. Sometimes when I go and visit different devotees, and people say, they're so pure, their worship is so wonderful. The first thing I do is look at the paraphernalia, and I can understand straight away where the consciousness is with the worship. It's very easy to understand where our consciousness is at. We just have to look how clean we are. If we're clean, this is a good sign. Yeah. And Mahaprabhu is making the point here that by such worship you will surely attain ecstatic love for Krishna without delay. Yeah? So if we're serving the deity in this way, always trying to be very, very pure, then very quickly we'll achieve this love of Krishna, which is our goal. Yeah, Prema Pumarto Mahan. Eka kunja jala ara tulasi manjari. Sattvika seva e shuddha bhavikari. For such worship, one needs a jug of water, a few flowers from a tulsi tree. This worship is in complete goodness when performed in complete purity. So again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is emphasizing this point of purity. Because Prabhupada makes the point, there's that verse where Arjuna, what was he saying? Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavam, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, Adi Devam. So he says this, you are the supreme pure. But actually Prabhupada, in a lecture, he says extreme pure. There's no one more pure than Krishna. And then Prabhupada makes the point, to approach the supreme pure, we must also be pure. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's giving us the qualities here. This is what we have to look at. The Chaitanya Charitamrita is mostly dealing with philosophy, more so than the Chaitanya Bhagavat. The Chaitanya Bhagavat deals more with pastimes. Of course, there's also philosophy there. But here we see that he's talking about philosophy, and he's telling us what is necessary. If you want to advance spiritually, if you want to go back to Godhead, what is necessary? And purity is essential, because until we become restored to this Nirmala, there's that verse from the Rad Pancharatra where he says we become restored to your original pure identity. So until we become restored to this original pure identity, we're not actually going to be eligible to go back to Godhead. So this is a very, very important point. And also another really important point that he's making here is how simple the worship is. A jug of water and a few flowers from Tulsi. Yeah? But we see now in ISKCON, the worship becomes so complicated. What Prabhupada introduced was a very simple process of worship. But like when he installed the deities in Melbourne, for instance, he installed these large Gaur-Nitai, these brass Gaur-Nitai, they're about this tall. He installed them personally. And he had a saucepan full of yogurt and a soup ladle. And he's just like bathing the deities with a soup ladle. Yeah? When he installed Jagannath Baladev Subhadra in San Francisco, what did he do? He put them on the altar, and he had Malati organize a tray with a whole lot of candles on it, and everyone in the temple just offered the candle, in the tray of candles, 7 circles. That was the installation. Yeah? Now, installation goes for 3 days. You have all these, these what do you call it, Vastu homas and Vastu pujas and all these yantras they do, and you'll see when they come and do the installation here, practically the whole temple room will be taken up with the yagya, and there'll be no room for the kirtan. It's become such a big thing. But Prabhupada had a different approach. And of course, I'm not criticizing the rituals at all. They're a good thing, because for those of us who are not very advanced in devotional service, it makes a really good samskar. It makes a good impression, and then we can think, oh, something's happened here. And that we see in the 6th canto, Prabhupada describes how when he installed the deities in Vrindavan, he had to do all these costly rituals. Like when we installed the Panchatattva in Mayapur, I can't remember how much it cost, but I remember there was 5,000 litres of ingredients were poured on the deities, like honey and yogurt, and so it's 5,000 litres. And he said, but for us, simply the kirtan, this was sufficient to install the deities. So always keep perspective, It's not necessary to do these rituals. The main thing is the chanting, the main thing is the bhakti. But if it helps devotees to be more conscious of the deity is present, because some people will consider if you don't do this ritual, it's a statue. So we have to be mindful of that, but also as followers of Prabhupada, we need to understand the main thing is the holy name. This is the Yuga Dharma, and everything can be successful if we simply have faith in the holy name. If you look at Prabhupada, when he first went to America, what was his main thing? He went to Tompkins Square Park. You've been to that tree in Tompkins Square Park? They call it the Hare Krishna tree. They've got the tree that Prabhupada sat under, and chanted Hare Krishna. It's still there. And so Prabhupada, he went there with what he called a dum-dum drum. It was just a little bongo, and he just played on the bongo, and he chanted Hare Krishna. That is what began this movement, and that is what will sustain this movement, is faith in the chanting of the holy names. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving a very, very simple process of deity worship here. I'm not suggesting you start doing that here, by any means. Just follow what you're doing. But the point is the ritual is the vehicle for the bhakti. It's not that the ritual's everything. Keep it in perspective. Understand what the ritual's for. It's just so we have, because if you don't have ritual, if you don't have things defined, then people will start to speculate and they'll do their own thing. We see that happens all the time. I won't tell you about some of the things I've seen. But all the time, I'll tell you about one. There was one thing I saw recently where, not recently, quite a while ago, where someone had taken a photograph of Radharani in Mayapur and photoshopped teeth in her, and put a big smile on her. This is offensive. It's actually offensive. We don't make up our own process. Prabhupada, he wrote a letter to the head Pujari in Los Angeles in 1975 or 6. I can't remember what it was. And he said, the greatest danger will come the greatest danger to our movement will come when we add or subtract anything in the deity worship. Just go on as I've shown you. So Prabhupada didn't want us to make up a process of deity worship. He's already given us anything. If you want to know how to do deity worship, read Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 24:334. Prabhupada gives the full process of deity worship in one purport. He talks about 64 items of worship. Very clearly explains what we should do. Yeah? We don't need to add things. We don't need to add new festivals. We don't need to address the deity in funny ways. And Prabhupada didn't give that. So we need to be very, very mindful that we just follow what our Acharya has given us. And of course, what is coming from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Dui deke dui patra madhye komala manjari, e mata asta manjari diva shadakari. With faith and love, you should offer 8 soft tulsi flowers, each with 2 tulsi leaves, one on each side of each flower. And it's nice that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying soft tulsi flowers. Yeah, the small buds, they're very beautiful, but also you can eat them easily. Sometimes you'll see devotees where they'll pick the older ones, which got the hard woody stalks on, and they put that on the bog offering, and you chew that and you get these sticks, they stick up into your gums. Now, our mouth is quite strong, whereas Krishna's skin is so delicate, you touch it, it changes color. So in his mouth it's very tender. So we don't offer Krishna things like that. We always, it's a personal process. The process of bhakti is a personal process, and we're trying to cultivate a relationship with Krishna. And if we don't care, whether we offer hot water or cold water, or we don't feel like dressing the deity fully and we don't put a shirt on in the middle of winter, how are we being personal? So we should always be mindful that we're doing everything we can for Krishna's satisfaction, and always trying to think of things like this, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, offer soft tulsi. Sri Haste Shila Diya E Agadila Ananda Raghunatha Seva Karite Lagila. After thus advising him how to worship after thus advising him how to worship, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally offered Raghunath Daska the Govardhan Shila with his transcendental hand. And as advised by the Lord, Raghunath Das worshipped the Shila in great transcendental jubilation. He was so happy. He received the Shila directly from the hand of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then he worshipped him with great satisfaction. And obviously we can understand this was very purifying for him. He made great spiritual advancement. Eka vitashti dui vastra pinda eka kani sarupadi lena kunja anibari pani. Swarup Damodar gave Raghunath Das 2 cloths, each about 6 inches long, a wooden platform, and a jug in which to keep water. E mata Raghunatha karena pujana puja kale deke shilaya vrajendra nandana. Thus Raghunath Das began worshipping the stone from Govardhan, and as he worshipped, he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, directly in the stone. And another really important instruction. Prabhupada sometimes, actually I think it was at least one time he asked the Pujari, so how is Krishna? How is the deity? And the Pujari, Prabhupada, I don't know, you know. He says, no, you should know. You're the Pujari. You're with the deity always. Huh? So the Pujari should know that this is Krishna directly, and that it should know whether Krishna is happy or not. Sometimes Prabhupada would say, I can tell by the deity's bright faces you are worshipping them very nicely. So there's symptoms there. You can understand, whether Krishna is happy or not. Prabhura swahasta datta govardhana shila e chinti raghunatha prema basigela. Thinking of how he had received the Govardhan Shila directly from the hands of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Raghunath Das was always overflooded with ecstatic love. So what's the quality that's being stressed here? Any thought? I'll read it again. Thinking of how he had received the Govardhan Shila directly from the hands of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Raghunath Das was always overflooded with ecstatic love. Yeah, exactly. gratitude. He felt so much gratitude that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had given him the Govardhan Shila. And for us in devotional service, this is a very, very important quality. You know, it's not that we achieve things by our own qualification, because honestly speaking, what qualification do we have? There's a really nice lecture Prabhupada gave when he installed the small brass deities in Los Angeles, Rukmini Dwarka they call them. And at the end of the lecture, Prabhupada is talking about the qualities necessary to worship Krishna. And the main thing he mentions is humility. He says, don't be puffed up. He's saying, like, you know, when you make an offering, you should be thinking that, my dear Lord, I am rotten, I am fallen, I have nothing to offer you, but I've brought this to you. Out of your kindness, you please accept it. Not that we're thinking, oh, I'm such a great cook, you know, of course Krishna's going to accept. We understand that, you know, I mean, Krishna's got Mother Yasoda and Radharani cooking for him, you know. How can we compete with that? You know, we should understand our you know, tiny position and how merciful Krishna is, that out of his kindness he gives us rotten, fallen jivas the opportunity to serve him directly. And this, we see that Prabhupada would sometimes describe the deity as the mercy incarnation of the Lord, because he descends. You know, what does Krishna need with the offerings we offer him? What does he need? Like, you look at the deities, you know, all the jewelry is plastic. What does he need that for? Plastic jewelry. You know, and like the you know, the clothing, I mean, you know, it's not, you know, we might think it's really expensive, you know, for us it is, but it's nothing. You know, I remember the old, does anyone remember the old Benares saris? Like the old Benares saris, where they used to have the gold jari wire on them? Pure gold. You don't see them anymore. No one can afford that sort of thing. You know, so I mean, Krishna has the most fabulous facilities, the most fabulous opulence. Yeah? So whatever we have is insignificant. And we need to understand it's only out of his mercy, it's only out of his compassion upon us that he comes in the deity to give us the opportunity to cultivate a relationship with him, because we cannot perceive the transcendental with these mundane senses. So out of his compassion, out of his unlimited mercy upon us, he comes as the deity to give us this opportunity to have an exchange with him. So it's really important, and this is why this is such an important pastime, is that we try to deeply cultivate this understanding of Krishna's mercy and develop this gratitude. Everything we, you know, it's just like yesterday, day before, yesterday we was at cottage, so they were reading from the Lilamrita at Radha Parthasarthi temple. And so this is the point I was making there, was like, everything we have is due to who? Huh? Not Guru's mercy. Everything Guru has is due to who? It's due to Prabhupada. Yeah? It's only because of Prabhupada that we know anything about Krishna. I mean, properly know anything about Krishna. You know, I mean, so many people in India know Krishna exists. They've got so many strange ideas about who he is. Yeah? He's a lusty young boy, licentious behavior, you know, all this type of stuff. And they like that kind of idea because it justifies them in their lusty behavior. They've got so many strange ideas about who Krishna is. But it's only due to the mercy of Srila Prabhupada that we have anything. Our way of life, the diet, the association, the beautiful temples. This is all due to the mercy of Prabhupada and the sacrifice he made. So again, it's an opportunity for us to express our gratitude. Yeah. Okay, I'll just read a few more verses and we do some questions if you want. Should I read a few more verses and then we have some questions? It's up to you. You're the boss. Jala tula shire sevaya tandra yata sukodaya sodasa upachara pujaya tata sukhanaya. The amount of transcendental bliss that Raghunath Das enjoyed simply by offering water and tulsi is impossible to achieve even if one worships the deity with 16 kinds of paraphernalia. So this Sodasupachara Puja, this is a standard thing in all the sampradayas. Slight variation. In Gaudiya, like you'll see in other sampradayas, upavit is one of the upacharas. We don't have upavit as one. We include that with the dressing, but we'll have the puna archaman. Sanatana Goswami mentions puna archaman because after having madhupak, the mouth is sticky, so you need to have puna archaman. But essentially, the 16 items of worship are there in all the sampradayas, and this is a standard way of worshipping the deity. But we see, because of Raghunath Das's love, because of his gratitude, his appreciation for the process, and also his acceptance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions on how to worship the deity, he's deriving so much bliss with his simple worship of water and tulsi, more than we can derive from these 16 items of worship. So it's emphasizing the value. And this is what we need to do, in everything we do in devotional service, the underlying thing that's going to make our bhakti successful is the values we hold. So always, don't be so concerned about, if you're the biggest book distributor or whatever like that. Be more concerned about the value you hold when you're doing that. What is your motive? Are you out doing book distribution because you want to get the biggest score, and then the wampas, when they read out the scores? Is that your motive? Or your motive is to save the fallen conditioned souls? Your motive is to please Srila Prabhupada, to please your spiritual master. So it's all about the values we hold. This is what's going to give us success in our life. Actually, there's a very famous person, you may have heard of him, Albert Einstein. And he said, strive not to be of note or noteworthy, strive to be of value. So we should always strive to be of value, to add value to people's lives, to add value to the world, to add value to the society, by our actions, by what we do. And this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is emphasizing here, is the values. Anyhow, it's a wonderful pastime, and I encourage you to read the whole pastime, and you'll see that that again, because what's going to happen next is Raghunath Das Goswami, Swarup Damodar Goswami is going to give Raghunath Das further instructions on how to worship the Srila. And he also says because he's telling to offer first-class sweetmeats known as kaja, and we're all familiar with kaja, yeah? There's Jagannath Tamas and Sandesh. And again he says to offer them with faith and love. You just throw the plate before the deity, ring the bell, say the mantras and that, which you see sometimes. You're not really interested in the deity. Is Krishna going to accept? Is he going to accept your offering? Maybe, maybe not. There's no guarantee. But if you offer with faith and love, what does faith mean? Faith means you accept the deity as Krishna directly. Sakshat Brajendanandana. We understand that this is directly Krishna. And Krishna explains in the Gita, he says, Yayata mam prapadyante tangs tatai bhajamyaham. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So the thing is, if we understand, if we're trying to worship Krishna as a person, okay, even we may not have this realization to begin with, but if we go through the motions, we try to serve him as a person, what happens? He reciprocates. He'll invest the realization in us. He'll help us to understand. Because this realization can only come by mercy. You can't do it by your personal endeavor. It can only come by the mercy of Krishna. So by serving Krishna in a way that indicates that I see that, or I understand, at least intellectually, that Krishna is present before me as the deity. So it means when you dress the deity, you don't stick him with pins. If you accidentally stick him with a pin, what do? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Treat him as a person. Dress him according to season, bathe him according to season, make sure the food's always, nicely spiced and not too much salt, not too little salt, not burnt. Yeah, so many stories you can tell. All right, I'll finish there. Any questions at all? Yes, Roger. Maybe use the microphone so you don't have to yell.
Krishna. Hare Krishna. What do you mean by self-realization?
What is meant by self-realization means understanding factually that I'm eternal servant of Krishna, part and parcel of the Lord. Because right now, I mean, maybe it's different for you, but I can tell you for sure for me, I think I'm this body. And everything I do is to satisfy this body. Sometimes I do things to satisfy the devotees, and sometimes I do things to satisfy Krishna. But mostly I try to satisfy my body because I'm convinced this is me and this is my vehicle of enjoyment in this world. But when we're self-realized, we actually understand. I'm just saying this intellectually because I'm not self-realized. So when one is self-realized, then one understands who they are and their relationship with God. Because when you understand who you are, it means understanding your situation in the world or in the universe or in the creation. Yeah? So self-realized means to understand that I'm an eternal servant of Krishna and my duty is to serve him. Is that okay? Yes, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Who is called a devotee and who is called a pure devotee? What is the definition of a pure devotee? And who is called a devotee? If a person chants 4 to 5 rounds of Mahamantra, is she or he called a devotee if he or she chants 4 to 5 rounds of Mahamantra? And what is the definition of pure devotee?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a little bit sort of nebulous because different times the acharyas and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would give different definitions. Sometimes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said that anyone who chants the holy name even once is my devotee. Yeah? And then other places we see there's more involved definitions. But anyone who accepts Krishna as God, you know, even though they may not chant regularly, but they identify themselves as a servant of God. They understand that he's my master, I am his servant. That's a devotee. Prabhupada sometimes, and as far as pure devotees, Prabhupada would sometimes say that all my disciples are pure devotees because they were endeavoring with all their effort to please him. But generally speaking, like a more sort of general or sort of defined, it means someone who has no material desires. That's like a pure unalloyed devotee. But pure devotee can just mean someone who's endeavoring with all their effort. You know, they may not be free from material desires, but they're using their time, all their time to serve Krishna. So essentially, you know, mostly devotees here are pure devotees because they're trying, you know, with all their time to serve Krishna. Yeah?
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Pranam Hare Krishna Prabhuji. When we free from the soul?
Sorry?
When we free from the soul? Soul, Atma.
When are we?
When we free from the soul.
When are you free from the soul? Never.
Soul. S-O-U-L.
If I'm understanding your question, never. Because you are the soul. You become free from the body. The body is external. The soul is the self. Atma means self. I'm not sure if I understood your question though. Did I understand? Yeah. No, the question's also, it's good inquiry. Because you are the soul. You are a soul, that's you. The Atma, the Jiva, there's many different names, but you are that spark of life inside. And the soul eventually becomes free from the material body, but you can never become free from the self. Okay? Yes, Guru.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, devotees sometimes go to Vrindavan and they want to take a Govardhan Sila for worship. So is it allowed to have Govardhan Sila from Vrindavan and worship at home?
Prabhupada generally would encourage devotees to worship the temple deities. You know, I mean, of course, you know, when devotees have deities at home, we instruct them how to care for them and things like that. But really what we want is devotees to worship in the temple. Because, see, like when you have a deity at home, who benefits from that? The family. That's about it. But when you have a deity in a temple, and the deity in the temple is worshipped very gorgeously, just like I had the good fortune of having darshan of Sri Sri Gaunitai, Krishna Balaram and Radha Shyama yesterday. And there were hundreds of people in the temple room, and you know throughout the day thousands of people are going to go through that temple room. Where I was asking Sadhu Hridoy, how many people visit the temple every day in Santnagar, and he was saying like daily 5,000, 10,000. On Saturday I think it was like 20,000. On Sunday 30,000 or more. So the devotees, they come, they see the deity very beautifully dressed. They appreciate the Lord. They get so much benefit from that. They take darshan of the deity, they take Mahaprasad. They get so much benefit. So Prabhupada's emphasis was definitely on temple worship. He didn't want devotees to have deity worship at home. And as far as, if you are going to have home worship, because Prabhupada, sometimes he would say, if the temple is, too far, like if you're living a long way from a temple, and here in Delhi, sometimes the traffic is just incredible. It can take you an hour just to go a few kilometers. You can walk faster. It may be practical for devotees to have deities at home, but generally speaking, it's recommended that one get instruction from the Guru to take up that worship, because when one gets initiated, there's different things the Guru gives you. He gives you, Tattva, Punda, mantra, all these different things. And one of the things he gives you is the method of worship and the deity. So that's interpreted in different ways. Like sometimes they'll say, like in terms of the deity, it means like he gives you the deity in temple. But sometimes devotees see that might be, personally giving you a deity. So yeah. But one thing very important to consider, and this is something that a lot of devotees don't understand so well. Deity worship means daily. Every single day. You bathe the deity, you dress the deity, you feed the deity. Sri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Sringara Tan Mandira Marjanado. Whenever Prabhupada would quote this verse, and he quotes this verse a lot, he'd make the same point. Nitya means daily. Not weekly, not monthly, not once a year. It means daily. So it means if you are going to have deity worship at home, do it every day. You bathe the deity, you wake the deity up, you bathe the deity, you dress the deity, you offer the deity something to eat, and you offer an arati. It can be very simple, but it should be done every day. Like we see here, very simple, but you do it every day. Raghunath Das Goswami, he bathed the Govardhan Shila every single day. So, yeah. Otherwise it's not deity worship, it's something else. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu.
Brahman initiated regarding he's engaged in different preaching activities also.
Yeah.
Brahman initiated devotee, but they are doing preaching, different preaching activities is also there. So how they should balance deity worship, and what do you recommend basically, Prabhuji?
I know if you speak to Banu Swami, he'll tell you that the only purpose behind receiving Pancharatrik Gayatri mantras, Pancharatrik mantras, is to worship the deity. That's the purpose of it. And it's just like, we have here Gaur Nitai, Radha Krishna, and Jagannath Ballabha Subhadra. So when you worship Gaur Nitai, you need Gaura Mula Mantra, Gaura Gayatri. When you worship Radha Krishna and Jagannath, you need Gopal Mantra and Kama Gayatri. When you worship the Guru, you need the Guru Mula and Guru Gayatri. So that's what the mantras are for. It's like whenever you offer anything, you say Etat Padyam Klingoraya Namaha. You use a mantra when you're offering something to the deity. So that's the point of Brahman Diksha. So, for someone who's a Brahman Diksha and doing preaching service, this is a very important service. Because we're ultimately we're trying to bring people here to the temple to become worshippers of Krishna. But it is recommended that devotees who are, Sankirtan devotees, etc., do deity worship. I know when I joined the temple in Melbourne, Australia, every morning, it's different now, but because there was a lot of Sankirtan devotees back in those days. But every morning, because they have the large Gaur Nitai, as I mentioned, they're like this tall brass deities, so it's quite a workout polishing them. But every morning, what would happen is the Sankirtan devotees, 2 Sankirtan devotees every day, would come and polish the deities. So at least they have some connection with the deities. So, it's really important for you to have that connection, because, through serving the deity and through your preaching work, it's going to help you to develop the realization who it is you're serving. But also you need to be reading. Because if you're not reading Prabhupada's books, what's your understanding of the process of bhakti? There's a really important lecture that Prabhupada gave in Mayapur, probably around about 1974, 1975. And what happened was Prabhupada was giving class, and some devotees got up to leave. And Prabhupada said, "Oh, where are they going? Some other business?" Ugrakama. Really heavy, And then he took the class on a completely different path, and he was emphasizing the importance of hearing and chanting. And he said, if we don't have this life of hearing and chanting, and so that means this is what our whole motivation is, a life. It's just like, you talk about your life's breath. So without breathing, you have no life. So hearing and chanting needs to become like that. That without hearing and chanting, you feel like you're dying. So if we don't have this life of hearing and chanting, Prabhupada said, the deity will become a burden. And this takobari, you know what takobari means, eh? Takobari means like the house of the deity will become a home for the pigeons and the doves. And you'll simply think that this old man has given us a stone around the neck, Galagraha, he said. So we have to, we're all going to find a different balance. I can't tell you what's the balance for you. You have to find your balance in spiritual life, but you need to preach, of course. We have to tell people about Krishna in any way you can, any opportunity you can. Like when I travel on the plane, when I travel on flights, I interact with the air crew, I interact with the people, I interact with, I should just try to interact as much as I can. Coming over to Indore from Mayapur, there was a young woman on the flight. She was one of the airline crew, and she was just asking me some questions. So did I give her a book? I gave her a book, Perfection of Yoga, and I put her in touch with one of our devotees in Mayapur, because she lives in Calcutta, so she can go to Mayapur, she can interact with them. So we just try to give them Krishna wherever. I'm not like a frontline Sankirtan devotee. My thing mostly is teaching deity worship. But Yare Deke, Tare Kare, Krishna Upadesha, Maragaya Guru Hara Te. So Chaitanya Prabhu said, whomever you meet, you tell them about the science of Krishna as is explained in the Gita and the Bhagavatam. But then also for your purity, your personal purification, do deity worship. Because you're touching the Supreme Pure, you become purified. And through service, through preaching service, through deity worship, and through studying the Shastra, your realization will develop, and you'll understand that this is Krishna directly. But reading is so important. Hearing the philosophy is so important. Hearing Prabhupada is so important. We have many, many wonderful preachers in ISKCON, and by all means listen to them. But most important, hear Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada is speaking the absolute truth. Prabhupada is speaking the absolute truth in an uncontaminated way. Prabhupada is a pure, unalloyed devotee of Krishna. And to hear from him, it will, just like that album Prabhupada did, Krishna Meditations. That album, Krishna Meditations, bhajans. Whenever you listen to that, whenever I listen to that, I feel like I'm in the spiritual world. Prabhupada's bhajans are something else. There's nothing like Prabhupada's bhajans. So we need to have this connection with Prabhupada very strongly. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari 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 Bol.
Let's pay our gratitude to Prabhuji by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So is nothing of which Prabhuji ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, upcoming Gaur Purnima Maha Mahotsav ki jai. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for amazing class.